there's so much out there. We're ready for a change and we're ready to grow. A lot of people have this inner spark that pulls them to the direction of what they call spirituality. And I'd look through time and I'd watch people that say they were spiritual, but yet in the next breath they would get angry and upset. And I was reading a book one time, and I can't remember the name of the book, but this young monk in training says to the old teacher monk, so why is it that this person, and he was looking at all the other monks, why is there so much anger if there's so much spiritual enlightenment? Why are they angry? And he says he hasn't been able to bring that spirituality into the physical. And I thought, yes, that's what normally happens to people. I've run across so many people that say they're spiritual, they'll talk the talk, and then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, they're back being just human, which is nothing wrong with it. But I thought, how come we are not really bringing in that spiritual factor? Why aren't we? And that's when I took my journey of really digging in deep of, there's got to be a way. There's always a back door. There's always a solution. Something, something, something. And I found something, because now my soul says I'm supposed to teach it, walk it, talk it, dream it, do everything. And people will come to you and you'll learn the baby steps you need. And now it's coming to taking what was done in my office, was helping people resolve their issues. And that created a big difference in their life. It wasn't just a physical healing, and it was kind of like mental release of all the self-chatter. All the emotional attachment just kind of went to the wayside. I've had people that have been depressed and on medicine, and no longer do they need that, because they feel like there's more joy in their space. And they don't need to have and the medication and other little things that worked for them saved their life, but at the same time, now they don't have to feel like they have to have that. So I brought from the office into the classroom, and since 2003, I was teaching, and then all of a sudden I was asked by the end of 2012 to be done with it. I have to release that energy and now open it up to a broader perspective of people. So this is why I'm here. So I'm offering the free class. I'm not sure exactly for how long, but looking for people that are actually wanting to resolve their issues. So I call resolve to evolve. Allowing yourself to resolve those issues in life that otherwise they haunt you. They take control of your life. They tailspin you out. And I am to bring the education along with the tools to help you transform your world, because that's what happened to me. Was I transformed my world by using different tools. I'm a soul coach, which helps you understand the language of the soul, helping you understand what you already know. You are very wonderful spiritual beings. You read code all the time, but it's how we interpret it that we haven't really talked and grasped, and there's not a big enough group consciousness that will actually can hold it yet. So the more that we learn to keep creating, we had a guest today on Medicine Women Reveal, and his name is William Whitecloud, and he has the principles and he teaches them and to transform your world. And what was incredible was how, we do it differently, but it's all going back to what is grinding you is learning to release it. My biggest question was, how the hell do you release it? People kept telling me, just let it go. Let it slide off your back. Just let it go. How? That ended up being my echo, because I would do everything they tell you. I'd cope with it. I would think happy. I would be positive thinking. And yet, this seemed like the end results were always the same. Until I started to go deeper on the quantum physics of understanding what I was seeing. Okay, so energetic wise, I'm looking at all of the chords. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, what am I supposed to do? What does all that mean? My husband, which is Scott Bates, he would say to me, oh, I always get a red light. And I would watch him, the energy would leave him, so I'd see the entanglement cord to the red light, and I'd see energy loss. And I didn't have the language at the time to say to him, stop doing that, you know, or when you say that, you're reinforcing a thought. What you're really doing is you saw the Matrix, you read the Matrix, and it was not based on what was the future, but it was the unfoldment of what he already programmed himself to be. He had this pattern, he knew it, so he could conceive it. And he started to link a physical thing is at fault, meaning, oh, that did it. So therefore, that must be linked to why this happens and I have this feeling. So every time he would go down that road, he would automatically send out the frequencies from him. He would emanate energy out, and then it would cause him to follow into a repetitive pattern of getting a red light. And he always wondered, why in the hell do you always get red lights, green lights? You get them all the time. I says, because I can conceive that I get them. I don't have to be stuck thinking I only get red or green. Divinely speaking, whatever unfolds is for the highest good. If I'm supposed to stop and slow down, so be it. If I'm supposed to have all green lights, so be it. But it is stopping yourself from what, as you create, understand what you're reading and understand that you can change that. You don't have to be a victim of repetitive thought patterns. Are you with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so our frontal lobe is such a huge piece in the way we create reality. Now, being that said, people have been born without brains. They have a brain stem. You know, we don't really need anything physical, but we do when we want to create the illusion and participate with it. People have walked around without brains and are still fully functional like you and I. But because we do have brains, they were able to dissect it and say, this is what's happening here, this is what's happening there. And over time, those little places like the caudate nucleus, there's only two things that can be in that part of the brain, and that is fear or joy. Joy can't be in there if fear is there, because all your focus and attention is on how you know your reactions, their reactions. It's about how you relate to the frequencies. So if you're in sync, that's great. But if you're out of sync, then you have been observing that it either is going to attack you, engulf you, it's ignoring you, it's pushing it away. It can do so many things that we can label it as, because that is how we use the frequency to define our world. Okay? So how else do I want to put this? If you've had a bad experience, that means you were going along happy as can be. The bad experience would occur. And then how are you going to react to it? So this is the bad experience. How are you going to react to it? It depends. When you have mental abuse, it can feel like it's coming in through the ears, and so it could sound like it's attacking. Have any of you ever felt like you've taken offense and because somebody was pointing out a flaw or saying something rude, or you take offense? And that is because all of a sudden you trigger a memory, and then it triggered something in you through your sensory system, and you're like, wait a minute, I marked that so long ago as it's hurtful, it's mean, I don't want that in my space. The main reason why? Because you can't process. You're unable to process that moment. And so what did we do? We learned to pacify, deal. We learned to cope. We learned a new way to get around it. We know that we can survive. We know that we've coped with it before, and just because it's showing up a little differently, we know, which is good, that we can go through it again. But we still don't have the process like we used to, instinctualized as the fight, flight, freeze, and then the process it out. The wild animals can process it out. We have forgotten. But through the healing tools, you happen to remember. Now, it's very important to watch your behavior, because your behavior is going to be the product of what you've stored. And your subconscious mind runs the whole show. You, the observer, as you're observing all this around you, Your subconscious mind is recording it. But if you make a decision that that moment was very terrifying and you'll never be able to forget it because you can't process it, and you will then store it and mark it, waiting for the another time and another day for it to pop up, and then you can say, oh, I get a chance to process again? I get to process this? But see, we don't think that. What normally do? We just get mad, right? How do you know? What's one of the signs that you would have that says that an issue came to the surface and you're unable to process it?
It's just the excruciating pain in my body, and some people would just say, because it triggered the familiarity of pain of when my back went out or when I had whiplash or that kind of thing. So if I wasn't doing the investigation that I'm doing now, and even though you started in on the investigation, I didn't want to do it to start with. It was just like, I'm in pain. Can't you see I'm in pain? I'm in pain. Just leave me alone. And then, so that's a way that we don't probably initially think of not being able to process our issues. We just think it's pain. Was one example. And just... I mean, there's plenty of times where I still get lost in the situation, and I feel like there are times when I feel like I have to defend myself, and I just get lost in an argument or a fight or whatever, and I just, I play out that fight or whatever. But I would say that those are current examples, what's going on in my life now, that I get lost, I get confused, I don't, I'm not constantly thinking, oh, gee, I'm the observer, I should be spiritual in this moment. No, you said something to me, it pissed me off, and I'm going to tell you how I happened.
And what you're doing is giving yourself a fresh experience about how you needed to react to survive. And what's funny is that we go into either that fight, flight, freeze mode. A lot of times when you don't know how to fight back, it's because you really didn't develop that ability to fight. And so you end up going to that freeze mode and you feel like you lost before you began. Then through time, because I had my first marriage, I learned to fight back. I was able to get over that frozen hurdle, but it didn't resolve the issue. It just created another layer, and I went from one extreme to the other. And so it was like, okay, that wasn't any better. At least now I got a backbone. At least I can talk. But I still had the underlining belief systems that were, and issues that seemed to still control my world. And I didn't know how else to change it. I remember reading self-help books. And even when I had EFT, the emotional freedom technique, I couldn't find the value of it. And because I couldn't find the value, I would put that tool down. And I'm thinking, yeah, I just can't get into it. It's not for me. But my soul kept sparking and saying, we need to get happy again, because you're constantly striving for happiness and joy, that dopamine factor, the endorphins. You need to get back to happy, get back to center. And people have addictions quite a few times because of the simple fact that the hellish moments in your life don't let you be you. You become those over identities. You become your stories. You get lost, as the words you put, because you do get lost. You have learned a different type of behavior, a different type of perspective, a different type of personality. Because there's many times that I've been in a situation where I've watched myself change my behavior according to the people in my room. One time, my husband and I, when we were first young married, his friends would come over and he then would turn into somebody else. He didn't turn into an ass, amen, but he did turn into somebody that I didn't know. And I'm like, wow, that's a side that I hadn't really seen before. Not sure if I liked it or not, but at the same time, that was what would happen? We morph into old ways of being. Like, for instance, Jen, when you went back home, you all of a sudden, instead of being Jen, the adult, started to take back onto the role model of this is where you're supposed to be as the daughter, or, you know, the cousin, or the old Jen. And so by being forced to go into that, and what do I mean by forced? It means that the energy of how you used to know it presented itself again, and you couldn't help but go into those roles that you play because you haven't released the entanglement cord. You hadn't dissolved or resolved the energy. Now, when you do stuff like that, you can also stand back and observe and go, oh my God, I don't want to be that anymore. So you start to see your power of choice. You may not feel like you can stop it, but you don't waste it. Just take and learn from it and go, wow, I become this when they're around. Why do I do that? Do I need to? And there's all these different ways that you can transform and to grow from that point. But if you were to revert back to it and you don't feel like you can be you and you lose your voice, then there's a bigger healing that's going to have to come out of it. Because it won't be coming to you with grace and ease. It'll start to come at you and start trying to demand your attention to get a resolution out of you. Okay? Any questions so far?